All right, let's go ahead and get started. Thank you everybody for joining us today. Today we're going to have a webinar. And that webinar is titled, Does Your Business Continuity Plan Need a Makeover? A couple of housekeeping things before we get started. Number one, as we go through the presentation today, if you have any questions, please feel free to put those into the questions and answers area located in the Zoom application. We will be going over those at the end of the webinar to make sure that all of your questions are addressed. Also, this webinar is also going to be recorded. So if you want to watch it again or even share it with additional team members, you'll have access to that recording so you can do that. So I will go ahead and get started. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Karen Arriviaga, and I am an account executive here at Qualtrics. We have a good mix of some customers of Qualtrics on this webinar and some that aren't customers. And so I want to give you a quick review of who Qualtrics is. We are an all-in-one compliance management solution. So what we do is we provide our customers with a solution that helps them with their quality initiatives, document control processes, and testing and training are features within our product. And we tie that with our team commitment to our customers in the industries they serve. We find if we really take the time to better understand our customer base and how they're using the product and the burdens that they're under with compliance, we can make sure that's top of mind when we are adding more product functionality, but also how we service our customer base. We ourselves are ISO 9001, and we have been an ISO 9001 certified organization for quite some time. We actually recently just went through our new audit last year. We were founded in '93. We are 25 years old and just celebrated our 25th anniversary in May of this year. One thing we're very proud about, we do have a 97% customer renewal rate. We really value our customers. They are our best resource to understand how the standards are changing, and then also how we can make sure that new functionality is added to the product. And if you are familiar with Virginia at all, we are actually headquartered in Blacksburg, Virginia, which is home to Virginia Tech. We are very proud to be in a college town. So at this time, I'm going to introduce you to our guest presenter. Kathy Scorby is a principal of KNS Consulting, LLC. She works with professional service firms to achieve their goals in the areas of business continuity, disaster preparedness, risk management, and compliance. Kathy, a certified business continuity professional, trains management professionals in all levels of staff in private service firms and facilitates tabletop exercises in these focus areas. Kathy retired in 2017 after 33 years with the international law firm Hutton & Williams, and has more than 37 years of experience in the legal industry. Additionally, Kathy served on the International Board of Directors for the Association of Legal Administrators, ALA, was a trustee for the foundation of the Association of Legal Administrators, and currently serves on the ALA's International Relations Committee. She continues to receive outstanding reviews as a frequent presenter at ALA conferences, ALA, ACP, and other association local chapters, and with private service firms on disaster recovery, business continuity, and risk management issues. So at this time, I'm going to invite Kathy to join me and take control of the screen.
Thank you, Karen. Just give me a second and I'm going to take over control here.
Sure.
And thanks for inviting me to speak on this webinar, and thanks to Qualtrics for the introduction. I appreciate it. So as Karen just mentioned, and I hope you all can hear me okay, I'm having a little bit of internet issues, so just bear with me if it breaks up at all. But I spent 33 years with the law firm of Hutton & Williams in a variety of roles, and for about 7 or 8 years with the law firm, really focused on, I was the firm's business continuity manager, and it was a role that I really liked. The firm had 19 offices all over the world, and so I was responsible for managing the business continuity process and disaster preparedness in all of our offices all over the world. And I decided in 2017 that it was time to retire from the law firm, but I wanted to continue on in the business continuity world. And so I became a consultant and am loving the life of speaking on business continuity and disaster preparedness and working with all different types of firms to help them move their business continuity programs forward. So I'm going to start by saying that whether, while you're listening on this webinar, whether you're a company that already has a business continuity plan in place and you're looking to update it, or you are a company that is looking to put a business continuity plan in place for the first time, it's important, I think, to really just start this webinar by defining a disaster. And so a disaster or a crisis, and this, as I'm defining it, is any situation that threatens the integrity or the reputation of a firm or business, usually brought on by adverse or negative media attention. And I give you that quote because I want you to focus on the fact that disasters are not just the things that people think about, like tornadoes or hurricanes or, even these days, active shooter kind of situations. It can be anything that affects your company potentially in a negative way. So you can think about, and I'm having a little trouble clicking on slides here. So just bear with me for a second. I'm going to give you some statistics. And again, these statistics are several years old. And I know from the research that I've done that the statistics are higher than what you're seeing on your screens. But from the research that has been done about disasters, and we're talking major disasters in this situation, 50%, and I put or more because I think the statistics are higher, of businesses that experience a major disaster will never return to the marketplace. And that's a really scary thought. And further, of those companies, businesses that do survive a major disaster, 50% of those companies will file bankruptcy within 3 years. And those statistics really show, because if people aren't prepared, if companies do not have a plan in place or have not really thought through what their business continuity plan should entail. And so ultimately, it's those companies and businesses that survive are the ones that are prepared to meet their clients' needs by preparing to react to a disaster, whenever that disaster may happen. And these days and times, unfortunately, it's a situation of not if a disaster is going to happen, it's when some crisis will happen. And as I talk to people about disaster preparedness and business continuity, I always talk about the fact that it's not really the big disasters that are going to bring a firm down or a business down. It's something little. It's something little that it's unexpected. And that's why you'll see as we go on, I'm going to show you the essential components that I think are the essential components of a business continuity plan. But it's all about preparing and testing and thinking through those plans. So I've put up on the screen here the essential components of a business continuity plan. And I'm going to spend some time going through each of these areas. But I want to focus on, and again, this is a high-level presentation, so we could spend hours going through each of these. But, I'm certainly available after this session, or in the future, if anybody wants to dig deeper into any of this information. But I'm going to focus on disaster recovery in the IT world. I'm going to focus on risk management issues that your company needs to focus on and think about. Crisis communication systems that are out there that if you don't have one in place that you need to think about. Putting together an actual written plan of all the things that we're talking about. And then it's continuity of business. Thinking about what happens if your office or your building is uninhabitable for some reason. It doesn't matter what the reason is. What would you do? Where would you work? I'll spend just a few minutes talking about business interruption and insurance coverages because that's a piece of disaster preparedness and business continuity. And I'm going to talk a little bit about crisis management and communication teams and how important they are to a company and business as you're trying to prepare your plan and put your plan in place. So from an IT perspective, I'm sure you all have IT departments in your company, but even if it's a small company and there's only you or a couple of other people, these are just kind of things that you really need to think about. You need to think about that your network, your overall network, your primary network, whatever networks you have in place to manage the systems in your company, to make sure they're backed up consistently. And I have to laugh because in the early days of me working at my law firm, and I was in a branch office in Knoxville, Tennessee, we didn't have a company that managed our backups. We managed our own backups of our networks, and I literally brought the tape home to my house every night. And I laugh about it because then I started thinking, well, what if I have a fire in my house? Or, it's very vulnerable to have the firm's backup there. And so then I started putting them in the bank deposit vault every day of our local bank. And then ultimately we got to the point where we would hire a company to come in and take our backups offsite and store them offsite until we needed them. And hopefully you all are doing the same type of things, and you're ensuring that your backups, your networks are backed up. But you have to think beyond that and make sure that you're testing those backups to make sure that they are effective and they actually recorded and they actually have the data on there. And depending on the size of your company, a lot of companies now will consider moving their primary networks offsite. So if something happens to your office or your building and it's uninhabitable and there's no electricity, no power, no way to run the networks, if you've got your networks running from a different location, then you're in much better shape than if everything is in one place. And that's why I say redundancy is important. And a lot of companies will run parallel networks. They'll run a primary network offsite and a parallel network onsite so they can switch back and forth if there are any issues. But having knowledge of your building's IT systems and your building's HVAC systems are really critical, because you need to know if the power goes out, and does your building, if you're a tenant in a building, do you have generators that the building has that work? How long do those generators last? All those kind of things you need to be thinking about. And if you haven't, you need to talk to your building's management and make sure you understand how their systems work, so you'll be prepared in the face of some emergency. Cybersecurity protection, we could spend a whole day talking about cybersecurity, but you need to make sure these days, most companies and most clients are directing and dictating in some respects that the companies that work with them have cybersecurity protection or cybersecurity insurance. And I'll talk a little bit about that later on in the webinar. You also need to make sure that you have whatever phone systems you have, that you have capability of redirecting those phone systems in the event, again, you can't operate from your own location. And you need to make sure that your phones can be redirected to, if you're a company that has multiple locations, you can redirect to another office, or another phone number if you've got another phone number set up. So those are things from an IT perspective, again, at a high level, that I think you just need to be thinking about as you're preparing your business continuity plan. And every business needs to be thinking about risk management issues. It's kind of rare these days that businesses own their own building, and they're in most situations, businesses and companies are tenants in buildings. And I know in my former law firm, we were tenants in high-rise buildings all over the world. And so a big part of what I was responsible for was looking at the risk management issues surrounding being a tenant in each of our buildings. So as a business, while you're looking at your business continuity plan, you need to look at assessing your risks, whether they're internal risks within your building, or whether they're external outside of your building. And are you in a high-rise building? And that can make a difference if it's a multiple tenant building. And you need to look at the security and vulnerability. Many companies will hire people to do security and vulnerability assessments to make sure that their space where they reside within the building is is secure and is not vulnerable. I know I'm in Richmond, Virginia, and my former law firm is located literally next door to one of the, I think there are 12 Federal Reserve banks in the country. And so being next door to a Federal Reserve bank has its own set of risks and can possibly be put the firm and the building that this firm is located in a vulnerable position. So those kind of things you need to be thinking about, and wherever you're located. And then, from a security standpoint, is your space in your building secure? We could talk, again, a whole nother webinar session on, and I'm actually doing a webinar session next week on drills, different types of putting together drills for people in buildings, whether it's evacuation drills or shelter-in-place drills or security drills, looking to make sure that your space is secure. Can anybody just walk in off the ground level into your space? Or are there locks? And can people just come in the elevator? Are there badges? People have to use badges. Do people have to log in? Is there security in the bottom of the building? Those types of things. Are your people at risk, or are they vulnerable at all? Because let's face it, the people that work in our businesses are the most important people. They're the most important assets that you have. And your job in putting together a business continuity plan is to make sure that your people are safe and that you have put safeguards into your business to make sure that everybody is safe. You need to look at past disaster situations, around you. Are you in a city that, a large city that may be more vulnerable than living where Qualtrics is, for example, in Blacksburg, Virginia? It's a beautiful college town, and I live in Virginia myself, but it may not be it may be safer than living in New York City, for example. So those are kind of things you need to be thinking about. And geographic locations, again, where you're located. Have there been internal systems within your firm biggest thing that people need to worry about is, are you in a building with multiple tenants? And could something happen to a tenant above you? Could there be a flood from their space that floods into your space? Again, it's something totally out of your control, but that can be a disaster. And I'll share with you in a little while an example of something that happened in my former law firm that potentially could have been a major disaster. So those are things you really need to be focusing on from a risk management standpoint. Hang on a second while I'm trying to. Karen, I think I might be stuck and you might need to change the slide for me here. There we go. Oh, now I got to go backwards, sorry. All right, hopefully now this will work. Sorry about that. You need to focus on crisis communication systems. I don't know how many of you on the webinar actually have a crisis communication system in place, but it's something you need to focus on to think about how you will communicate with everybody in your company or your business if something happens. And if it happens during the day when everybody's there, you have ways to communicate by email or phone. But what if something happens in the middle of the night and all of a sudden your business you're in a building that gets hit by a tornado, or that's flooded, or you just can't, one of your neighbors has a disaster and the police won't let you enter the building. So these are things that you need to think about in how you would communicate. And there's all different types of systems. Most people back in the day, and a lot of people still have a telephone tree system. So it's just a chart that shows, few people will start calling a few more people, and ultimately everybody gets called to let them know that maybe the office will be closed that day or the next couple of days. The problem with a telephone tree system is it's like that old game of telephone. Whatever the message was from the very beginning, is that the same consistent message that everybody's getting all the way down the line. A lot of companies now will have a toll-free emergency number that all employees know the number, whether it's inclement weather or anything, that they know that they can call in, and there'll be a recorded message as to what is the status of the opening of the business that day. I know a lot of companies will use password protected web pages or even social media pages to give information to their employees. A lot of companies now are using automated notification systems, and they call them reverse 911. So instead of an employee calling out to a 800 number, the system calls every employee, everybody in the company. And somebody's designated to record those messages, put them on the automated system, and then send them out. And they're sent out to everybody's cell phones, home phones, emails, personal emails, text, so that any device that somebody has that they've entered into this system and into this database, they can then be notified as to what the status is of the buildings, of the business for any particular time, any particular issue that might be happening. So all of those systems, the big thing I can tell you about, thinking about what type of system works best for your business and your company is that you need to test. Make sure you update the systems frequently. And whatever system you have, it's only as good as the information that you've provided into the system. So, make sure that you update it. Crisis communication systems need to be updated as often as people move and change around, but at least two times a year to make sure that all the information is current. So when you're thinking about a written plan, if you already have one in place, or if you, you're looking to start a business continuity plan, these are just some thoughts and some ideas of things that you need to be thinking about. Your written plan needs to be well organized, and more than anything else, it needs to be easily communicated. You can have a plan, your plan can be as complicated or as simple as you want to make it, or as comprehensive as you want to make it, and you need to think about all the things that I'm talking about to incorporate in your plan. But if it's 55 pages and in the middle of an emergency, you're wading through it trying to find contact information for a particular person, that's not helpful to you. So you need to be thinking about how to organize it and how to communicate it to everybody so that everybody knows that you have a plan in place. And there are sample business continuity plans out there, templates that you can get out on the internet that you can use to start. But part of the issue is you're the one who knows your business, and you know what will work best and what's most important for your particular business. So you just need to think about how to organize it and how it can be best communicated in an easy fashion. And clearly you need to have all your employee and staff contact information, how to get a hold of people if you need to, whether it's through an automated communication system or a simple telephone tree. That information needs to be part of your business continuity plan. Same thing for all your vendors and all the people that supply information and resources to your company. You need that information. If your building is uninhabitable and you're moving, you're going to some temporary location, people that are supplying things to you, from your coffee vendor to supplying paper to you, to your IT systems, all of that, you need to have that contact information for those people. And I would suggest, if you can, put your business continuity plan into somewhat of a checklist format. And because when you're in the midst of a disaster or a crisis, again, as I said before, you don't want to be wading through 55 pages trying to find that one person you need to get a hold of. If it's in a checklist fashion and it's organized, you can go through that checklist pretty quickly and move on and get to the critical things that you need to deal with. But you also need to have any kind of links to other critical information. Things like, if you're dealing with natural disasters, links to FEMA and links to hurricane and tornado preparedness that are on Homeland Security and FEMA's websites. Those are things that are helpful because if your business is dealing with a disaster, your people personally are dealing with a disaster as well. And you want people to be able to deal with their own personal situations as well, so they can continue to work in the business if possible. And you may want to consider, if you have the capability, an electronic version or even an app, because you want to be thinking about, if clearly you want your business continuity plan to be in a hard copy, first of all, and you would want to keep it in your office, you'd want to keep it in your car, you want to keep it at your home. But if the internet is working and you have electricity, you certainly might be able to get to an electronic version of your business continuity plan, as well as all the people would be able to get into and know what they need to do through an app, if that's possible. And Qualtrics is somebody that, is a company that can certainly help you with their document management systems and their workflow, and we'll talk a little bit later about testing as well. But they're a company that certainly can help in creating your business continuity plan, putting it together. Now, I mentioned it before, but you need to be thinking about, as part of your written plan and as part of your overall business continuity plan, what happens if you can't work from your office? And what do you need to do? And where will you go? Now, most people in this day and time can work remotely from home. But you need to really be thinking about, what does that mean? Do they have remote access? And do they have approval for remote access to be able to work from home? And I know when I was working with the lawyers here in my law firm, we talked through this, because when I would talk to partners in the law firm and they would say, yeah, I can work from home, I can communicate with my clients just fine. But when you really drilled down, they didn't have what they needed at home. They didn't have a multifunctional device that could scan documents and send documents to clients. They didn't have, they didn't bring their laptops home, which was an issue to begin with every night. And, some people had personal PCs at home and some people didn't. So you need to be thinking about, if one of your options is to have everybody work remotely from home, do they have the capability to do so? If you're a business that has is a multi-office business, multiple locations, could your people work from another office or location, depending on the geography and the geographic location? In my former law firm, we had offices all up and down the East Coast. And so we knew that we could move people around fairly easily if we needed to, if something was going to happen, something happened in one of our East Coast offices. You need to think about whether or not you would move to temporary office facilities, and or alternatively contract with a specific disaster recovery provider. And there are a lot of them out there that could provide alternate facilities for you, or even mobile units. We contracted with a company that would provide mobile units, and they would ship them into whatever city the disaster was in. And they worked from satellites and off generators, so that our lawyers can continue to work. And they look like just big mobile trailer kind of things. They were just looked like conference rooms on the inside. So that was kind of neat. I mean, we never actually had to do it, had to move people in there, but we contracted with the disaster recovery provider just as an insurance policy in the event that we needed them. Temporary office facilities are something you really need to think about. Are there companies or people that you work with that might be able to share space with you that may not be a competitor, but in the event that your building was uninhabitable, that you could move into, maybe use their conference rooms? Are there hotels nearby? And I say that because we had a situation in my former law firm about 6 years ago in our Miami office, where a pipe burst in the wall of the building. Just very strange situation. But it burst one floor below my firm's Miami office. We were up on the 23rd floor, I think. And I think the pipe burst right below it. And there was another large law firm, branch office of another large law firm, on the floor where the pipe burst. And interestingly enough, that building in Miami, right on downtown Miami, was adjacent to JW Marriott. And so that firm immediately scrambled, called the Marriott, said, can we use your conference rooms as kind of a triage while we're trying to figure out what we're going to do? And the Marriott was great and let them use their conference rooms for, I think, up to a week. And interestingly enough, unfortunately for that law firm, and my firm was not affected at all, just very lucky, very fortunate. But for this law firm, they worked with a real estate broker, found temporary office space, because within hours of this water leak, there was already mold growing in the office. Their computers were underwater. Paper was ruined, documents, everything. They had to move everything. And interestingly, after 6 months, they still were not able to go back into the space because they were trying to redo it and clean it all up. And ultimately, they decided never to go back, and they ended up, just in another location, permanently in another location. So again, some of these things are simple things that are totally out of a business's control, but alternate workspace options is really critical as part of your business continuity plan. Because your ultimate goal is to continue providing service to your clients. And you want that service to be seamless. And you want to be able to say, well, you know what, we had a disaster, we had some sort of a crisis, but we can still continue to help you, Mr. Client. Just briefly on business interruption insurance, if you are the person responsible for putting together a business continuity plan, you may or may not be the person who's responsible for your professional liability and your business interruption and the type of insurances you have to cover your business. But you need to know what your firm or your business interruption insurance is. And you want to make sure that you have enough coverage if there's a loss of physical property. If your space, like in the example I just gave you, if your office space becomes uninhabitable permanently, and you want to know, because the insurance company is going to ask you what your losses are, and you want to know how you need to calculate those losses, how the insurance company wants you to calculate losses, and you want to know that ahead of time so that you're not scrambling when the disaster happens or kicks in. Are there elimination periods before coverage kicks in? Is there any exclusions? Are you in a floodplain area? Are you in an earthquake zone? Are there, exclusions to where you're located? And these days, if you don't already have it, you want to consider purchasing cyber insurance. I know in the big law firm world, clients are requiring that the law firms that are representing them have cyber insurance, and cyber insurance is not cheap. And up till recently, a lot of law firms, a lot of companies have resisted purchasing cyber insurance. But it's important. Clients, in the law firm world anyway, clients are entrusting the law firms that are representing them with their data. And they want to make sure that the law firm is protecting their data and has done everything in their power to make sure that there's not a data breach. And so having the cyber insurance is is an extra layer of insurance coverage. So again, there's a lot to cyber insurance, and I'm not going to spend more time on it, but it's just something you need to consider for your business continuity plan. So we've talked about having a business continuity plan in place, and I want to talk for a few minutes about having a crisis management team and how a crisis management team can help you make sure your business continuity plan is, one, in place, and two, is updated and is tested, and that you feel confident that you have a good plan in place. And depending on the size of your firm or your business, your crisis management team could be one or two people. It could be, a host of people. And that was something I was responsible for as the business continuity manager for my former law firm and in all of our locations. And these people were crisis management team members, were volunteers, and they were willing to be trained, and they were willing to learn more about different types of disasters and crises that could happen so that they would know what to do if something happened in whatever office they were in. And so you want to consider the size of your office to determine how many members that you would need for your team. But clearly you want the key administrative players in your office because they're going to know most about how the business is run. And you want people who are going to be willing to volunteer their time because it may take above and beyond just a normal, because it would be in addition to their normal job within the company. And you want people who you think will be calm and authoritative in an emergency situation. And I say you think because and I know this from personal experience, I was asking people to volunteer for these positions based on people and I knew most people in all of the offices. And I was asking people based on what I thought would be, somebody who would be calm, who could handle talking to people that were their superiors and their bosses in an authoritative manner when it didn't come naturally to them. But you never know in a crisis situation. The people that you think will be calm and handle things calmly may be the people that run screaming down the hallway. You just don't know. And so you've got to really take time to think about who would be the best people for your crisis management team. And then if you're in a business that's large enough and you have the opportunity, I would suggest you have a specific and separate crisis communication team. And I'll talk about that in a minute. And I spent a lot of time training with my crisis management teams. I worked with them on tabletop exercises, which I know Karen mentioned when she was introducing me, which are basically simulated real-time exercises, people sitting around a table, and you walk them through a simulated disaster so that you can walk through the procedures and protocol that you have in place in your business to make sure that you've got things in place. And tabletop exercises are really good just for the fact that they make everybody think, and they really bring out where you have gaps in your business continuity plan. And so they're important. And, face-to-face, online training, meetings, the webinars that, you're participating in now, and webinars that I participate in all the time, all of those are good for your crisis management team. And then actual drills. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm actually doing a webinar next week on the types of drills that you can actually take your crisis management teams through, and your employees and your staff. I mean, everybody in buildings goes through mandatory evacuation drills, fire drills. Everybody has to do that. Most cities mandate those types of things in high-rise buildings or in any type of buildings. But I don't know whether in your businesses you have shelter-in-place locations. And sheltering in place is basically just making people move. Instead of evacuating outside of a building, they are locating to an interior space away from glass, away from windows, where they would be safer. And that includes having safe locations for active intruder, active assailant, active shooter, you can call it whatever you want, but having those types of safe locations and safe rooms where people would know where to go if that situation were to occur. So having those kind of drills and training your crisis management team is really important. And if you are able to have a separate crisis communication team, you need to think about who the members of that team would be. And clearly the head executive in your business, the CEO or the partner or the chairman, whoever it is that would be responding to the media in a situation that might be media worthy or that was affecting your business, where you might need to speak to the media. And you need to think about how you would respond, or whoever that person is, how they would respond in a crisis. And think about putting together a crisis communication kit ahead of time. Think about putting together, literally in a box or somewhere that is safe that you can get to, information about your business that's kind of camera ready that you could hand to the media. Bios of the chief executives in your company that might be speaking to the media. Just things like that, whether it's letterhead, if you would need to, put out some sort of a media announcement. things like that you can put together ahead of time so that in the face of a crisis, you're not scrambling, trying to figure out where that information is. And I'll talk a little bit, just a couple of minutes about social media and focus on, social media today, it can be so positive and also so negative. And you really need to think about, the goals, the positive and the negative of social media and how that social media might affect your business. And if your business is in the midst of a disaster or a crisis, your goal should be, maintaining a positive professional image and presenting information that's timely, that's accurate. You don't want to be hiding behind anything, because whether people like it or not, everybody's out there on social media, and people are, on Facebook and tweeting about disasters before, sometimes even the authorities know what's happened. So, make sure whoever is responsible for communicating remains accessible and acknowledges concerns and is transparent. Again, it goes back to the first thing I said about the definition of a disaster. It's something that could potentially affect the reputation of your business. And by having all these things in place ahead of time, hopefully, again, you're going to be able to continue on and provide services to your clients seamlessly, and come through it unscathed. I found this quote probably 6 or 7 years ago when I started doing these kind of presentations. And, it's very still today, very accurate. Social media is like a snowball rolling down the hill. It's picking up speed, and 5 years from now, it's going to be the standard. Well, this person who was the chief marketing person of a Plant Moran, which is a bank, I don't think he realized at the time how true it is, because, he was talking about this at least 6, 7 years ago. And it certainly is the standard today. So with all that said, you just need to focus on now the state of readiness of your business continuity plan. Do you have the necessary and required resources in place? You want to be known as a resilient business. And I've talked about testing, and I've done webinars on testing, and I work with law firms, I work with companies on how they can test the things they have in place for their business continuity plans to make sure, test them ahead of time to make sure that they're ready in the face of a disaster. And a way to make sure you can assess your critical business functions is by conducting business impact assessments. And that is basically looking at, in a face of time increments, looking at a potential disaster in the first 2 hours after it happens, the first 5 hours, the first 10, 24, 48, 72 hours after a disaster. Who are the critical people that you need to make sure that your business can continue to function? And what are the critical resources you need? And there's a whole, protocol and procedure to conduct business impact assessments, but they are critical, and that's one of the first steps you can take. And Qualtrics itself is a compliance organization, and I know in the law firm world, a lot of clients are now requiring that the law firms that are representing them are compliant with ISO certifications for business continuity, for cybersecurity, for IT security. So if you're a business that needs to be compliant, do you have the necessary steps in place to make sure you can ensure that you are compliant? And again, it's all about testing. So, focus on all the things that I've talked about, focus on the state of readiness for your business continuity plan and for your business, and hopefully you will be ready if that disaster materializes. Hopefully it won't, but if it does. So with that, I've got my information up on the screen, and I think Karen will put it back at the very end, but I'm going to turn it back over to Karen, and I know she wants to talk a little bit about Qualtrics.
Wonderful. Kathy, so thank you so very much. The content in your presentation was fantastic and very relevant, and I really think that everyone on the call got a lot of value out of it. So thank you so very much for doing this presentation for us. I'm going to take back the screen at this point, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about Qualtrics and how we relate to the idea of business continuity in your plan. As a reminder, Qualtrics is a compliance software solution Kathy touched on, and so what we're going to really help you with is controlling your documents, your processes, and your training for accreditations and so on. This is a quick look at 4 specific ways in which our software supports business continuity and disaster recovery. These are within the product itself, so document management, making sure all of your documents are in one centralized location, workflows, and so this is process automation, and guaranteeing that you're creating a consistent process surrounding your disaster recovery. Also, testing and training, and so ensuring that employees are familiar with your plans, and then you have a way of tracking if they've comprehended those plans. And then we also offer what is called a hosted environment. This is a cloud-based solution that will allow you to access your information that's stored in Qualtrics from anywhere using a web browser. To drill into document management supports business continuity in a number of ways. First off, ensuring your documentation is up to date across your organization. This is a critical step towards preparedness. When automatic alerts that are going to get sent out by the system, it'll actually remind you to make updates to expired documents or to approve or release new revisions of documents. You can also assign role-based actions to these documents to make sure certain people are alerted with these actions they need to take. In the event of an emergency or in the wake of a crisis, finding necessary documentation is made easier by housing them in a centralized location like this, rather than storing them on desktops or unique places on a server. Workflows are also a great way to automate processes that you have in your organization, so you can report and have visibility into that data that you're collecting. So some examples of how organizations are using workflows include corrective action requests, internal audits, validations, and so on. There's not a limit to the type of processes you can automate with Qualtrics. When you're thinking about using workflows for your business continuity plan, they can be used, like for instance, to track workplace injuries or incidents. Maybe this is going to be tracked through a nonconformance or a CAPA workflow that you have in Qualtrics. Kathy mentioned risk management, and this is also something that can be tracked with a workflow. You're going to collect information of potential risks that your organization could face, and then be able to devise plans and actions to mitigate those risks. Disaster recovery or crisis communication can also be sent out through Qualtrics for specific instances that can be triggered through workflow automation. And automatic notifications will get sent out to anybody that would be involved. We even have what we call our best-in-class workflows that come pre-configured with your system. When you purchase Qualtrics, we'll give you 5 of these workflows. This makes it simple to introduce your organizations to workflows and process automation. But they're also based on our expertise with working with different organizations and how they're using Qualtrics for their accreditations. These workflows, though they'll come in your system, they can also be modified to meet your unique way of executing these processes. The next area I'd like to talk on is testing and training. Kathy touched on often the importance of testing your processes and your business continuity plan and making sure everyone in your organization is familiar with this process. So in the time of crisis, you are ready to act and perform. With our testing and training feature, you can ensure that these employees are regularly demonstrating comprehension of business critical procedures and processes. The reason why Qualtrics makes this easy, number one, because we're going to automatically send alerts to individuals that need to be trained on your business continuity plan. You would set that training up in Qualtrics, assign it to specific individuals within the system, and then those automatic alerts will go out to those individuals, letting them know that they need to be familiarized with this plan, and so on. With that training, you can also set up different tests that can be used to track competency to this business continuity plan. Somebody can tell you that they've read that plan, but unless you're tracking and testing whether or not they're familiar with what their tasks need to be in this plan, you might not know if they've actually comprehended that new plan. Also, those tests will automatically be graded by Qualtrics, and managers will be notified of those results. So those managers will know who understands what their part is in a disaster recovery plan. And also, as a director, you'll have a clear visibility of who has completed those trainings and tests in Qualtrics. This document, or this snapshot that you see on the right, is actually our training matrix, which is a report that you can run directly in Qualtrics. And just by viewing this report, you're going to be able to see who has taken what trainings and what tests, who has completed those, which ones are optional, which ones are not optional, and what they have and have not completed. And then last but not least, the importance of going hosted. Kathy talked about having a plan for if something happened to your organization where you couldn't get to your content, to your files, to your binders, to your business processes. The benefit for going to a hosted environment is that you can access a hosted environment from anywhere using a web browser. Ultimately, when you're going hosted with our software, it represents the very best in business continuity planning. For example, we actually had a customer recently who was on premise with their solution, and so they were storing it on storing Qualtrics on their servers. Within the calendar year, they actually experienced a natural disaster, which destroyed their servers and thus destroyed their Qualtrics instance, causing them the need to revert to a stored backup that was actually from months prior. It made recovery for this natural disaster a nightmare. And so as you can imagine, there was a lot of delays with operations just trying to get reestablished. To contrast this example, we recently had a customer just move from an on-premise installation to a hosted environment because of this purpose. They themselves are an FDA-regulated customer. Their business continuity was the reason they chose to move from an on-premise instance of Qualtrics to hosted. They recognize that their clients, who are also FDA regulated, would expect this from them and be preferential to the cloud-based compliance software solution. Our hosted solution falls in line with Cassie's recommendation to have alternative workspace plans with Qualtrics hosted. If you have a computer with internet access, you can access your quality management system and all house documents and processes from anywhere using a web browser. I find that it is helpful to talk about the benefits of our software solution through the stories of our customers. They bring our software to life and are really the true heroes of the story. So this is an awesome customer. Jeff Frizzy is an assistant quality assurance manager for Cardinal Metals, which is a metal finishing manufacturer. They are in Indiana. They're ISO 9001. They also are compliant to ATF 16949, and they're largely serving in the automotive industry. And why we like to point these guys out, one specific area of use that supports business continuity is how Jeff is actually using document control to centralize critical documentation regarding training. He actually is linking to the training needs of each user or role. And so this makes sure that people are properly trained, therefore prepared, and they use Qualtrics to create a system that safeguards to keep everyone accountable to the express training needs. And so this is a quote that you'll see that he has about document management. And then my next slide, here's another quote about how he's using document lists in the testing and training module. And as you can imagine, Jeff is continually looking at the report of who has taken what trainings, what has been completed in Qualtrics. So he always has that visibility into his system and how people are interacting with it and who is prepared in time for a crisis. So with that being said, if you have any questions about Qualtrics or would like to see more information about our system and how we can help, if you'd like to see a demonstration, that's a great way to see how our product works. Please feel free to go to go.qualtrics.com/demo. You can sign up for a demonstration there, or feel free to reach out to me at Karen@qualtrics.com, and I'm happy to help. And at this time, I'm going to bring Kathy back on, and we'll go through a couple of questions that we have coming in. So Kathy, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Wonderful. One of the questions that has been brought up is why is it important to have all of the contact information for all of your suppliers during a time of crisis?
Well, I may have mentioned it while I was talking. If you, for example, if your building is uninhabitable and you're moving to temporary office space, you need to get a hold of all your suppliers and making sure they have they know where you're located, where you've moved to, whatever. So if you don't have all that contact information in as part of your plan, you'll be scrambling when the time comes. And it's just things that you don't think about, just like simple supplies, like I mentioned, the coffee vendor, or the people that have your letterhead or your business cards, or things that you would need to be able to continue your business. And on top of that, that's actually a good question, because it also brings up the fact that these days clients seem to they seem to direct everybody's workflow. But I know in the legal world anyway, our clients are now dictating that whatever suppliers or vendors that law firms use also need to make sure that those suppliers and vendors have their own business continuity plans in place. Because in the face of a disaster that affects a lot of people, including your suppliers and your vendors, you want to make sure that they've done what they need to do in ahead of time, so that they can continue to supply you with all the resources that you need. That would be the worst situation, is if you turn to one of your suppliers in the face of a disaster and they say, "Oh, sorry, we can't help you because we don't have a plan." So it just is important to have all that information at your fingertips.
Great, thank you. And to kind of piggyback on what Kathy was saying, this is actually something that can be tracked in Qualtrics. One of the things that we have in our system is the ability to do vendor approvals or collect information about the vendors and suppliers that you're interacting with. And so if this were to happen and you need to pull a report to see everybody that you need to contact, this is something you would be able to quickly pull up in our system based on that reporting. All right, I've got another question. How often does a business continuity plan need to be updated?
That's a really good question. I think standard procedure, standard protocol would say that every business's business continuity plan should be updated at least annually. I think a better protocol would be to update it semi-annually, because things change. Things change in your business. People come, people go. Contact people change. You may have moved to a different location. You may have added other offices. Things, everything is fluid in a business. And so you want your business continuity plan to be as updated as possible. I know in the law firm world, and in my former law firm, we updated our plan twice a year, in the spring and in the fall.
Great. And to jump on there about Qualtrics, one of the features within our document management feature is the ability to set automatic alerts to individuals, let them know that it is time to update those plans. And so it's a very helpful tool with that as well. Here's another one. Our organization needs a way to communicate in the event of a crisis, but we have a limited budget. What could we use?
Well, that's a good question as well. And I think I touched on that when I talked about the different types of crisis communication systems. Back in the day when automated systems first came out, they were extremely expensive. But there are systems now that, different carriers, even just your telephone carriers, are coming up with, some inexpensive ways to be able to communicate with a group of people. But there are a lot of companies out there that are disaster recovery providers that have, as part of their package, crisis communication systems. And I know of several that I've worked with that you don't need to contract with them for every part of the business continuity plan. You could just contract with them for a crisis communication system that works, is not hugely expensive. But, in some businesses, again, the decision is, well, I'm working right now with a small law firm, and, they've decided they they don't need a crisis communication system. A simple telephone tree will work fine for them. So you just need to decide what works best for your business, but know that there are a lot of options out there, and don't dismiss an automated system just because you think it might be too expensive. There are just simple research can show you that there are systems out there that are not all that expensive.
Great. Also, my business doesn't have a business continuity plan in place today. Where do I even start?
And that's probably the best question to ask, because I've worked in this area for so many years now, and I constantly have people, and again, my background is mostly in the legal world, but people in law firms would come to me and say, well, how did you even get started in this, and how did your firm even start putting together a business continuity plan? And you really have to start with the top down. You really have to get your buy-in from the top executives in your business. And, if they think it's important, then you're going to be able to start putting things together to have your business continuity plan put in place. I know that the former executive director of my former law firm, when he and I first started talking about it, his philosophy was, and I know I said it earlier, people are the best asset. The people we have in this law firm are our best assets. We could not survive without all the people here. And if anything happened to any of the people in this firm, I would never forgive myself. I remember him saying that to me. And so, it came from the top down, and and then I worked with the partners in the law firm. And I basically just, I used examples, and examples are really good. And I said, would work with these partners, and I would say, what if you went home tonight and you got a call saying that our building has had major structural damage because of a flood, and you're not going to be able to work in your office for the next 2 weeks? How would you be able to continue your business? Your business is to, represent clients in a variety of legal, situations. And, when you put it to somebody, how is your business going to continue? That really gets people thinking. And so that's where I think is the best place to start, is talk to people about how important it is to have a business continuity plan in place. And I would also talk to people about, because a lot of people would say, oh, well, we're never going to have a tornado come through here, or we're not in an earthquake prone zone, or, these things are just not going to happen to us. But a lot of times, as I keep saying, it's the little things that are going to get you. And to have a plan in place just makes everything seamless. So I hope that answers the question.
Great. I think that's fantastic. And everyone that's on the call, I highly encourage you to write down Kathy's contact information. If you have any additional questions about what she does, please feel free to reach out to her. If you lose it somehow, reach out to us, and we'll be happy to get that information to you. Kathy, again, thank you so very much for your time today. Everyone on the call, if there's any additional questions that you have for myself or Kathy, please feel free to reach out to us at any time. We're always happy to help. I hope everybody has a great day, and thank you so very much for joining us.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Karen.
Oh,
Bye-bye.
thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.